year ago, at the end of February, all eyes of the armored fighting world were turned to Belgrade. The capital of Serbia was preparing to host Buhurt Prime, which was delayed due to COVID. It's a fight between the 10 best teams in the world. The strongest fighters from Russia, Europe, and the USA were preparing to cross blades and test the strength of each other's armor. A grandiose event 2 years in the making. For 2 years, fans of armored sports had been waiting for the return of this final confrontation between the world's top teams. It was scheduled for February 26th. On February 25th, it was clear that there wouldn't be a tournament. The Warriors of Light from Ukraine didn't participate due to the military operation. White Company from the UK, Legenda Północy from Poland, and Prague Trolls from the Czech Republic decided not to take part in support of Ukraine or in protest of the participation of Russian teams. The last of the teams to withdraw were the Prague Trolls on Friday evening, the day before the event. And now there were 5 teams left in the list of participants, among which there were no Trolls and no White Company, who were both contenders for overall victory. The organizing team was dedicated until the very end. The guys tried to find any opportunity to hold the tournament, even with a reduced number of teams like it was with Buhurt Next. I looked at them from the side and I was not envious. This and that team didn't arrive? Okay, plan B then. Has another team cancelled? Okay, let's try and do this. The Trolls who've already arrived in Belgrade reported that they're leaving tomorrow morning. That's bad news. The situation was changing every minute, and at some point there was no other solutions other than to cancel Prime. Nevertheless, 5 teams from Russia, Monaco, the USA, and Poland were already in Belgrade. They'd come a long way and spent a lot of effort and money, by the way. The organizing team also did a tremendous job preparing a big, complex, grandiose event that was supposed to be Prime. So, cancelling the tournament and simply doing nothing seemed unfair to all those who'd already arrived. Yes, the Titanic was sinking, but they decided to play to the end. And then the prepared arena became an area not for a tournament, but for friendly fights, where the remaining teams were able to fight in a more relaxed format. There were no winners and losers announced at the end of the day, as it was a day of sharing experiences. The team from the channel Max Yun were also there. We were preparing to shoot the most grandiose event in the world of HMB, a real festival and enchanting spectacle. But it didn't happen. We were all in the same boat. And when the organizers decided to just hold fights, the fighters decided to just fight, and we decided to just film the fights of the 5 remaining teams. We were filming without a specific plan of what to do with the material in the future, and without being sure it would make sense. It was in the drawer for a year, and recently we blew the dust off, reviewed the video, and realized that it needs to be shown, since these 5 teams fought in a way that was truly worthy of Buhurt Prime. Well, the time has come. Here is an overview of what would have been Buhurt Prime 2022, the tournament that didn't happen. I will start the story with the Polish team of KS Rycerz. As I expected, KSR turned out to be the weakest team of the day. Unfortunately, the guys from Poland did not win a single round and weren't able to make a single pure frag. They had a very hard time. Each subsequent fight was harder than the previous one. Not only did it seem like their opponents were getting stronger and stronger, but with each fight the KSR substitute bench was becoming smaller and smaller. As a result, in their second round against Partizan, which was the 3rd fight for the Poles, only 4 fighters in white made it into the ring. The guys from Partizan were gentlemen and also came out with 4 fighters, but it didn't add to KSR's chances of winning. The last fight for the KSR Knights was against Grimaldi Milites, and it seemed like this would be the very fight where the Poles had a chance to win. And if it had been their first fight of the day, then maybe, but there were still only 4 of them, and the Monegasque were on point that day. I'll tell you more about them a little later. In the meantime, a little bit more about KSR. Here, for clarity, it's worth adding that everything I said above does not mean that KSR is a weak or a bad team. On the contrary, I remind you that the 10 strongest teams in the world are invited to Prime, and KSR is definitely one of them. Yes, their second place in the final rankings does not quite reflect their real strength, but they deservedly received an invitation to Buhurt Prime. And if for some reason, let's say, they partook in Buhurt Next, they could have won. That was a necessary remark. Let's get back to the fights. So, because of all these factors, I guess it's worth mentioning KSR's fight against Bearpaw. The second battle in which the Polish fighters were still strong, fast, and daring. Yes, daring is the right word. In the first few seconds, a KSR fighter runs through the Bearpaw lines and from the rear creates some tension for the team from Russia's Nizhny Novgorod. Without engaging, he threatens two halberdiers at once in such a way that he doesn't allow them to safely perform a series of heavy blows. This creates discomfort for the bear paw fighters because they cannot work in their usual positional manner. As a result, the lines are broken, the bear paw fighters are forced to maneuver, which is more familiar to the KSR fighters. Some of the Poles were running around the field quite actively trying to create sharp moments. The other KSR fighters demonstrated resilience and willingness to resist in order to give their teammates more opportunities for aggressive work. Bear paw needed just 1 minute to create an advantage, but 1 minute is a lot. This, however, did not break KSR. They continued to fight without thinking about the deft defense. As a result, it took another minute for the Bears to win, but KSR was looking good. They lost on the individual training of athletes, but technically, they did everything right. There is nothing to complain about. The second round was worse. Here, the Poles allowed themselves to be cornered from the very beginning of the round, and the halberdiers from bear paw, now there were 3 of them, were cutting the Pole downs without any problem. The first frag was once again bear paws, and it took them another minute to get that first frag. Then there was an exchange. Rafael Namazov turned out to be on the ground together with the Pole he was taking down. It was a stunning disarming of the KSF fighter. Halberts working, and the victory for bear paw. KSR lost this fight just like everybody else in the tournament, but they gave a great fight to the winners of the previous Buhurt Prime. It's worth understanding that once again, KSR is a top team. They did not receive their invitation by chance, but sometimes there are days in your life where the only way you can show yourself is to get up after falling, over and over again. And this was unfortunately such a day for the KSR team. Grimaldi Milites. This was the team that performed much better than I expected. At the first Buhurt Prime in 2019 in Monaco, they were very far from the top 10. Back then, the organizers arranged an exhibition fight between them and an Italian team, and the local team won it. But hand over heart, it was a so-so fight, and so were both teams who were involved in it. Few people could have imagined that 3 years later, the team from Monaco would become one of the leaders in European HMB, the strongest team in the French Championship, leaving behind the fearsome Martel and Aquila Siquania at the time. The fight between Grimaldi Milites and Partizan opened the event. Technically, there was no sensation in it. Partizan won quickly and unconditionally in the first round. The second round would be a hard one for the red and yellow team. They didn't manage to create a meaningful advantage. It was so hard that 2 minutes after the start of the round, we had 2 Partizan fighters on their feet against 1 fighter from Grimaldi Milites. Despite the fact that the 2 fighters for Partizan were Alexei Naidrov and Yuri Samuelov, 2 very strong and experienced fighters and the head coaches of the St. Petersburg School of HMB, the Monaco fighter didn't think of giving up. He demonstrated excellent defense and maneuvering. Sometimes he attacked them, managing to escape from the deathly halberd and twisting out of tenacious grips. 3 minutes passed and the Monaco fighter was still not defeated. Experienced Naidrov and Samuelov could not do anything with him. The round ended with a score of 2-1. Victory was given to Partizan, in the round and in the fight. But the Grimaldi Milites fighter definitely did not lose. And the name of this fighter, by the way, is Nikita Vastorgan. He's also a graduate of the Bern Club. He started his career in the Cubs team, but has been fighting for Grimaldi since their foundation. Then there was the fight against bear paw, which didn't hold any surprises. The Bears worked hard and professionally, leaving no chances for the guys from Monaco. Nikita Vastorgan, the hero of the previous battle, was beaten by 2 helmets. From the description of KSR's journey at the event, you know that Grimaldi Milites defeated them. It was a fast and bright fight where KSR didn't have a chance. But still, the main triumph for the team from Monaco was their fight against Cerberus Emissus. To be honest, the Americans were my favorite to win this fight. They were the champions of the North American Conference, and from the very beginning, I ranked them higher than Grimaldi Milites. Well, they looked more confident on the day. They defeated KSR and gave a terrific fight against Partizan, about which I'll tell you a little bit later. In general, I was sure that Cerberus would pass Grimaldi with a bit of a run. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one. How surprised we all were when the team from Monaco won the first round with a 4-0 score in just 1 minute. The first frag turned out to be mutual and fighters from both teams were on the ground. But the score didn't stay equal for long. The giant Tom Darvo Uber made one American sit on the ground. Another one, running away from him, chose the already mentioned Vastorgin as a target for his attack, but Nikita was on the alert and the American fell to the ground. At the same time, on the other flank, 2 Monaco fighters took another American out of the fight. The round stopped and Grimaldi won 4-0. second round was even brighter than the first one. It started again with a mutual frag. A few seconds later, a Cerberus fighter dropped one of the fighters from Monaco, and the intrigue returned to the fight.
A little bit of all you got can never bring you down.
At least it looked like it. But in the span of 8 seconds, Grimaldi's fighter number 3, Luis Pion, made 3 magnificent frags, one more beautiful than the other. And with a score of 3-0, victory goes to Monaco. It was great work by Grimaldi Milites.
A little bit of all you got can never bring you down. All of this,
Partizan Russia. In my pre-tournament analysis, I asked myself, what can we expect from Partizan, who hasn't fought abroad longer than the rest of the Russian top teams? Is the most titled team in the world still tough? Or were all those merits left in the past, and no one really needs to be afraid of the team from Moscow anymore? Well, what can I say? It's a hard question to answer unequivocally. It probably would be correct to say that Partizan is still on top, and maybe still even the strongest team. But I think the gap between them and their closest pursuer is smaller than it was before. However, it's not clear who exactly these pursuers are. Definitely not KSR. Partizan passed them without even noticing. Definitely not Grimaldi. Yes, they had to struggle with Nikita Vastorgin in the second round, but Nikita is a great, unique fighter, so we shouldn't take that into account. Furthermore, the first round was won without any problems. Throughout the day, Partizan showed itself as a cohesive, technical, fast, and sporty team. The squad was not perfect, but still very, very good. Unlike the other teams, Partizan was hitting a lot more, and they didn't stagnate with a single opponent. Their style is very variable. If their opponent has something to oppose plan A, then they simply move to plan B. If the opponent has an answer for plan B, red and yellow move on to plan C, etc., etc. Almost always, their range of options is richer than that of their opponents. And maybe they don't even work it out separately while training. Perhaps they don't even understand this, and after seeing my video, they'll say that they didn't have any plan at all. It's the matter of a special level of mutual understanding that arises amongst people who've been fighting shoulder to shoulder for such a long time. The only team from which I expected a clear confrontation was from Cerberus Emissus. There were some big names in that squad. And besides, I'll remind you that this is in fact the American Dream Team. The best of US HMB, and they were extremely motivated. It's worth saying that America's tops have always been hard opponents for Partizan. Dmitry Kunchenko's story about how Partizan traveled to the USA is on the channel. And I put the Russia-USA fight at the Battle of the Nations 2017 in Barcelona in my personal top Battle of the Nations fights. Links in the description. And I was right. The battle between Partizan and Cerberus became the highlight of the day. Every second of the first round was filled with action. The fighters of both teams were excitedly looking for opponents to frag, at the same time demonstrating amazing saves. Here, there was no hint of positional battle. Nevertheless, Cerberus were the first to gain and score. Alexei Klukov lost in single combat against the halberdier from the Americans, but Partizan didn't stay in the minority for long. A few seconds later, this same halberdier fell into the jaws of 3 Bern fighters at once and ended up on the ground. Then there were 2 minutes of equal confrontation where both teams demonstrated excellent teamwork, but no one got the advantage. There was one mutual frag and the fight switched to the 3 versus 3 format. 2.5 minutes later, and with the same score, the round was over with timeout. 5 minutes were not enough for Partizan and Cerberus Emissus to find out who was stronger. But there were still 5 minutes more in the second round, so the few viewers who were there were waiting in anticipation. The second round was more successful for Partizan, but not an easy round. After a minute of hard work, they managed to pull a fighter from the USA under the field and earn a small advantage. But it was not possible to use this advantage for a long time. After 2 mutual frags, Partizan leads the round 3-2. Nevertheless, the persistence of the red and yellow was rewarded. Distracted by Yuri Samoilov, a fighter from the US, gives up the slack and Benedikt Baksanov immediately punishes him for this. 3-0 and an extremely difficult victory for Partizan in that round. It was surprising, but having had the 2 toughest fights so far, the fighters from both teams were still fresh and hungry for a fight. The third round developed more or less the same as the previous 2. 2 mutual frags in a row, and finally they were fighting 3 versus 3. But Alexander Klukov does not let this last long. He performs a counterattack and sends a Cerberus fighter to the ground. He then, along with Roman Baranas, takes another American out of the fight and brings victory to their team. 2-0 in rounds and Partizan wins, but hardly anyone will say that it was easy. What conclusions did I draw from this fight? Partizan is still super top, and Cerberus Emissus, as the quintessence of the American style, is one of the best opponents for them. Bearpaw, Russia. Bearpaw is the second Russian team to come to Belgrade to participate in Buhurt Prime. What's more, it was this team from Nizhny Novgorod that won the tournament in 2020, back in Monaco, and they were finalists at the first Prime when Buhurt from Moscow won. In general, Bearpaw, along with Partizan, Prague Trolls and White Company, were the main contenders to win the tournament, which didn't happen. I already told you about their fight with KSR, there was no sensation there. The Poles were struggling, looking for an opportunity, but their opponents just went over their heads. Let's take a closer look at the fight against Grimaldi. Unlike KSR, the team from Monaco didn't try and offer Bearpaw something new to deal with. They offered a standard formation, the positional confrontation 2-1-2, which is definitely comfortable territory from the team from Nizhny Novgorod. Vostargen from Monaco tried to circle behind his opponent's back, but having met Rafael Namazov there, whom he knows quite well and who knows him no worse, he returned back to his own half of the field. And this was the end of Monaco's timid attempts to create a maneuvering battle. The first frag of this fight was performed by Sergei Kuritsun from Bearpaw to the accompaniment of Alexei Kamenev's Helbert. He was ready to immediately move to the second frag, but number 2 from Monaco, Vostargen, didn't allow this idea to come true. But this only delayed the fate of the Monaco fighter. Four was pulling on his head so hard that it was only a matter of time before this fighter fell to the ground. As a result, Four achieved his goal and already had a second Monaco fighter on his account. But he came out of this situation having problems. Having missed an obviously sensitive blow, he leaned on the barrier, temporarily unable to continue the fight. Nevertheless, the third frag in the round was also on his account.
It breaks out loud. Lost is in cages. It's on breaks loose. Just have to make it with someone I chose.
The Nizhny Novgorod locomotive ran over Vostargen, who got distracted by something. After that, Kuritsun apparently decided that he'd already done a lot and had every right to rest. Remaining on his feet and not leaving the fight, he allowed himself to lean on the barrier while his teammates finished the round. And so they did. 5-0 victory to Bearpaw in the first round. In the second round, the nimble and audacious Vostargen from Grimaldi immediately started the round against Alexei Kamenev.
But the first frag was in favor of Bearpaw again. Fighter number 3 from Grimaldi, Luis Pion, dropped his axe and, forgetting himself in the heat of battle, picked it up off the ground, which is forbidden. When he comes to his senses, he immediately throws the axe away and goes for his spare weapon, but the marshal saw everything and made the fighter sit down. The next frag against Monaco was caught between Kamenev and Kuritsun, two of the strongest fighters of the Nizhny Novgorod team. No wonder he wasn't able to stand and ended up on the ground. Vostargin does not give up, attacking the Bearpaw fighters until he finally finds himself in a super bad situation. A huge Kuritsun pressed him into the barrier and two halberds from Bearpaw knocked the last hits. With Vostargin on the ground, the round ends with a score of 5-0 to Bearpaw. Victory to Nizhny Novgorod in 2 rounds. You might think that mentioning this particular fight in the story about Bearpaw, then probably the fight against Cerberus was less interesting. It looks quite logical, seeing as Bearpaw defeated Grimaldi without any problems, and Grimaldi defeated the Americans without any problem. But on this day, the HMB gods mixed the cards up so smartly that the most unexpected battle of the bears was waiting for us at the end of the day. Cerberus Emissus, USA. The American team was the main mystery of the Buhurt Prime that didn't happen. They flew in from far away with the status of the strongest team in North America. But in Europe, this doesn't mean much. Historically, in the world of HMB, the American national team performs on a good level, but definitely not on the highest level. In the 5 vs 5 fights at the Battle of the Nations, they've never taken any prizes, although they're always very close. They just don't perform smoothly. They can explode and win one round being quite courageous, but then they can unexpectedly burn out and lose the remaining ones ineptly. Once again, I'm not talking about Cerberus Emissus, but about the peculiarities of the American teams that I've met before, including the American national team in different years. Maybe I'm wrong, but for the 10 years that US teams have been in my field of vision, I've gotten the impression that Americans are more sprinters than marathon runners. As such, they don't perform very smoothly. They cannot or do not know how to or just don't want to distribute force. I like the way they fight. They are fast, quick-tempered, unpredictable and strong. But that's the problem. They often don't have enough left for the second round. I quite logically expected the same from Cerberus Emissus. I expected the quintessence of the above approach. Guys who do the same things other Americans do, just better. And that's basically what it was. Their first fight, the fight with KSR, actually slightly surprised me. I expected the Americans to go through the poles like a bulldozer. But no, KSR resisted very well. Cerberus succeeded, but not fast. Nevertheless, the score in rounds was 2-0 for Cerberus. The team from the States won easily enough, but not with lightning speed. Then there was the exhausting battle against Partizan that I've already described. And then their meeting with Grimaldi, a fight which the team from Monaco won, which was unexpected for me. Then I thought that this was the feature of the American teams I've mentioned. Their inability to distribute force. Cerberus, exhausted by their fight with Partizan, no longer had the strength and energy to oppose Monaco, a team who obviously looked weaker. For this reason, I didn't expect any surprises from their fight against Bearpaw. It started as a regular positional fight, familiar for Bearpaw and less typical for Cerberus. The first frags happened as mutual frags in the center, and then everything went in an unexpected direction. Cerberus captain Daniel Krug throws Michal Maruchev. After the throw, Krug touches the surface of the field with his fist, but according to current rules, this is permissible, so the marshals don't take him out of the fight. The captain of Bearpaw, Vitaly Gruzlov, finds himself in a bad situation. Krug grabs his head and pulls it. Gruzlov stumbles and falls to the ground. And so, a minute into the fight, Cerberus has a 4-2 advantage over Bearpaw. 2 Americans are messing around in the corner with Alexei Kamenev, 2 more are chasing Rafael Namazov around the field. But Rafael is a tough guy. He escapes from their attacks deftly. It's not for nothing that he was named after the Ninja Turtle. At some point, his opponent will make a mistake, leaving another body on the ground. Namazov immediately takes advantage of the situation and the score becomes 3-2, so Bearpaw has a chance. But unfortunately, Raf is a lightweight, so this time he didn't step out the winner in a confrontation with a tall halberdier. Sensationally, Cerberus defeats Bearpaw in the first round with a score of 3-0. The question hanging in the air is whether or not they can do it again. Or was it an accident? In the second round, Bearpaw comes out with 3 halberds, perhaps hoping to find a gap in American armor. Aren't given a chance to work. The fighters split into pairs again. 2 mutual frags in a row start the fight. And almost immediately, Cerberus gains an advantage when marshals take Namazov out of the fight. There was probably something wrong with his equipment. The score now, 3-2 for Cerberus. One more mutual frag and 2 Cerberus fighters, Matthew Kridigan and Johnny Porter, remain on their feet against Alexei Kamenev. Alexei is a very strong man and the Americans had to struggle with him, but after some resistance they found the key and the Bearpaw fighter was left on the ground in a similar way to how Vitaly Gryzlov was defeated in the previous round. 2-0 in the round in favor of Cerberus Emissus, and with the same score in rounds, the team from the USA wins the fight. To say that this was unexpected is an understatement. Hardly anyone would have bet money on such an outcome. But what happened happened. The Dark Horse defeated one of the main contenders for victory for a tournament which didn't happen. It was real sport. A great plot for a sports drama. If Hollywood ever makes a film about HMB, they will probably be inspired by this fight. And they'll probably distort everything, but moving on. Does this mean that Cerberus is the strongest team because they defeated last year's champions? Of course not. After all, they themselves were beaten by the Monaco team, which last year's champions passed without any problems. But they are certainly one of the best teams in the world and can fight on equal terms with the strongest fighters. It should also be added that Partizan and Bearpaw did not fight against each other on the day, but in the 6 months prior to this event, these teams met 3 times at domestic Russian events, and the result was 2-1 in favor of Bearpaw. This is a vicious circle that reflects the level of opposition, the integrity in the fights, and the huge journey our favorite sport is on. It's evolved and real intrigue has appeared in it. It's finally become unpredictable. Buhurt Prime 22 could have become the best Prime, the best final in the history of HMB, a tournament that could have been discussed for a whole year in anticipation of the next one. But it didn't happen. Half the teams decided they couldn't fight, the other half decided they couldn't help but fight. One of the missions of our sport is a therapeutic one. In difficult times, the brain gets overloaded and nerves are on edge. Sport helps out. Everything is always simple and clear here, talking about HMB, beat, don't fall, and drop opponents. Fights and fighters were speeding up, they were spinning like an engine, gaining momentum with each blow, and at some point, for the fighters, for the judges, for the organizers, and for the few spectators, the world shrank down to the size of that field. And everything that happened in the outside world became irrelevant, at least for a couple of hours. There was only a selfless, pure and sincere fight, worthy of being talked about.